Well, remember last week we wound up with a wife for Isaac, and we saw the servant go to the land of Abraham to find a wife that was suitable for Isaac. And we might say, well, that was a prearranged marriage. Is that really the way you should find a mate? And the answer is found as we close out chapter 24, and the fact that in chapter 24, beginning at verse 61, it talks about Isaac being out in a field, lifting up his eyes and seeing Rebekah. Rebekah lifting up her eyes and seeing Isaac, dismounting from her camel, and the two are there in the field, and the servant tells Isaac all of the details of how he prayed. Of course, probably went all the way back to Abraham, how Abraham made him promise to bring a woman from his own people, and how he went and prayed, and how Rebekah answered that prayer, and how she came by faith away from her family. And certainly when we read the verses beginning at verse 66 and verse 67, we find that Isaac took her into Sarah's tent and there had relations with her, became the husband to her. And it says that he was comforted by her in the loss of his mother, Sarah. However, I think the words that we would need to focus in on are verse 67 are, and he loved her. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Whether it's arranged, whether it happens by divine appointment, and you meet somewhere, or somebody introduces you to someone, it's important that you love them. And here it says very clearly that Isaac loved her. What an interesting footnote as we go into verse 1 of chapter 25, and the fact that Abraham, in spite of his age, takes another wife, Keturah, and has 6 additional children in his old age. And verses 3 and 4 goes on and tells us the genealogy of those children. That makes kind of boring reading, but it brings a certain credibility to the scriptures that we can trace these lineages, that these aren't just made up stories. These are actual events that occurred and that we can trace this genealogy on through. I have some cousins that are working on the genealogy of the Vandewey family, and a lady at Green Pond, New Jersey, did a presentation on one of my dad's brothers who died in an ice boating accident on Green Pond during the winter, actually November, many, many years ago. And as a result, we started digging into all of the events around that accident, that ice boating accident. Another man was drowned at the same time. They were both really just teenagers, older teenagers, but both on swimming teams, both excellent swimmers, and yet in that frigid water and breaking through the ice, they both drowned. And so we have a tragedy that I'd only heard my father tell stories, and then this presentation this lady made at Green Pond, New Jersey this past week brought some additional factors and information in, and now I've written to the police to see if I can get the actual accident report, because there was lots of discrepancies between what one of my uncles said, what my dad said, and what the newspaper and police reports that were published had to say. And all of that said to say this, that genealogy is one of those things that brings credibility to the historical writings of the scriptures and towards the spiritual truths of the scriptures. I'm going to cut short today the devotion because I really have been in prayer for the loss of a fine young man at the church here in Landrum. Gordon Lee was a good friend, and he is going to be greatly missed. He was very involved in the men's ministry at Landrum, worked in a leadership role in the church, and was a fine young man with a wife and 2 children. I don't believe he was much over 50 years of age, but always offered to help my daughter find a teaching position in the upstate, and influence as much as he could with recommendations and so on to the school board. Just a fine young man, and we saw him grow up as we used to visit up here during our vacations, from a teenager into a fine man, a father, and husband, and he's going to be greatly missed. So I hope you'll pray for the Lee family. His father was a leader in the church. His mother is still living, and she's a leader in the church. And Gordon and Sheila, leaders in the church. I had the opportunity to teach Gordon's son in a youth department class, and I found that he was a fine young man also. And so I hope you'll pray for the Lee family. It's very difficult when your children precede you in death, and it's a terrible thing when they leave at a point where there's still good family relationships of young people being in the community and still close contact with mother and dad, and just a horrible situation, one that I don't think anybody should have to go through, but we just have to trust God in situations like this. But if you'll pray for the Lee family, I'd appreciate it. And that's my thought for the day. God bless you and have a good day.